hello. It is Thursday and it's time for another Let's Talk Power Live. I hope you're having a great day. It's summer. It is hot as Hades where I am. I don't know how hot it is where you are, but we're glad you're here. I want to ask you a question. Do you remember being told to take responsibility in school before anybody talked to you about what responsibility was all about? Do you remember the first time in school where somebody, an educator, an adult, expected you to be independent, but did not give you the skills to really know what independence looked like in practice? Last question. Have you ever, while you were in school, taken the initiative to be responsible and be independent only to be reprimanded? I remember that. It happened a couple of times. I'm one of those people that, show me the curb and I'm going to jump off it. Well, that's going to be part of our conversation tonight. Welcome again. I'm Dr. Tangi, and I am your host for Let's Talk Power Live. And I also lead Liaison Educational Partners, where we are in the business of making sure every student, particularly those at the middle school level, have an educator and a teacher equipped with the skill set, mindset, tools, and resources to ensure they get an excellent education. It's summer, and we know that this is the time when educators are really taking a break. They're not in the building, or they're on a truncated schedule. What does that mean? Some days are in, some days are not. But here's what we also know is happening. We also know that even though they may not be in the building, they're still thinking about the year that just ended, and they're giving consideration to the year that's upcoming. I just literally left Massachusetts yesterday working with a school district. It is an honor and a privilege to serve. And we spent the entire day looking at our professional learning calendar. And I say our because I'm part of the family now. We've been looking at the calendar because we want to make sure that there is coherence across every area. If they're going to be doing professional learning on bubblegum chewing, we want to make sure that every level has the same professional learning on bubblegum chewing. Here's one of their areas of focus. They're focusing on middle school transformation. Now, middle school is an interesting place. And if you have been following me, let me go back to our subscribers. Thank you so much for being a subscriber, for being with us on this Let's Talk Power Live journey. We appreciate your partnership. We appreciate your support. Now, here's what we have also learned. We have learned that a large percentage of you are still in the dating phase. Now, I love a good date. I've been married 32 years and we still go on great dates. But we made a commitment to each other. And I'm asking for your commitment. Go ahead, hit the subscribe button. Go ahead, hit the like button. And as the time goes on tonight, if what we talk about resonates with you, I'm going to ask you to share it with somebody. So let's go back to our conversation. Middle school is a messy place. And there are real conversations being had about what's going on in middle school. How do we make it a place where the students can thrive, where the adults can thrive? That's why I wanted to ask you those questions in the beginning, because here's what I know to be true. What is happening at the middle school level is really a disconnect between how the brain operates at that time in a child's life and what school is expecting of them. And that is going to be the basis of our power conversation tonight. And as I do every week, I'm going to give you that definition of power in education, because here's what we know: power in education is real, and instructional power is even more real. So here is our capital P power definition. Education is the instrument of democratic designs, and it is no less the instrument of power. The control of information, the shaping of understanding, and the influence of judgment are critical elements common to democratic design, power theory, and educational philosophy. That's the capital P. Power in education is real, and instructional power is even more real. So, what is that? Here it is. Understanding your instructional power. It can be understood as an educator's use of their state, their district, and building ascribed job-related authority to afford or constrain a student's access to learning. I want to also be clear about what an educator is for me. For me, an educator is anyone whose job it is to ensure that students have access to the two things: learning something and learning how to do something. If your job function, and it may include your title, gives you the authority and the opportunity to make sure a child has access to tools for learning, and somehow you do those, you give them the access, but sometimes you constrain that. That's a power decision. And we know every educational decision is a power decision. That's what power is. But I want to make sure that we enter this conversation tonight really considering what it is that's happening in middle school. And as we move forward, we're going to really dig into some of the challenging issues that we're seeing across middle school. And here's the thing we know to be true. What we are attempting to fix in middle school is what we see. The challenge is what we're fixing may not necessarily be the real issue. We have to dig a little bit further. So before we go any further, I want to invite you to get a hold of our Becoming Agency Savvy. It's part of our new set of education focused, leader development focused articles on middle school, where we really talk about what it is to be savvy when it comes to building agency. That's a term we love, we hear, it's all over the place. Challenge is, how many of us can say, as a leader in a district or building, every single person that we partner with and or serve who serves children has the same idea about agency that they all should? They have different ideas. What should it look like, sound like, and feel like? The other thing I want to talk about before we move even further into our conversation, we are so excited. We have our summer power chat series going on. These are 10 to 15 minute, one author, one book, one big idea chats. And we discuss what the author is thinking about in terms of building educator knowledge. It's summer. People are on break, but they still want to learn. So let's continue our conversation about the messiness of middle school. Here is what we have to consider, that some of the challenges we're facing, again, are what we see. And what we see may not necessarily be the whole issue. And what we are attempting to fix are the manifestations, the evidence pieces of the issues themselves. So let's have this conversation. Adolescents are still learning how to learn. That is why saying you need to be more responsible may not necessarily work, right? Planning is still developing for them. They may not know how to plan. And you'll say, well, if you're a parent, you've been a parent of an adolescent, we have been, well, why didn't you do this thing or that thing? And they say, I don't know. It's because they actually don't know. They really do not know. Planning is something we are asking them to do when their brains have not really grasped the concept of what it means to do a thing that we call planning. The other thing that we hear a lot about in middle school is organization, right? Why are they so disorganized? They can't keep a notebook. They don't know where anything is. Organization is still developing. We're asking them to really engage in activities that may not be developmentally appropriate for them. And then this idea of self-monitoring, just like the planning, just like the organization, monitoring myself is still developing, particularly for our rising sixth graders, because all through elementary school, they've had somebody doing a lot of things for them, helping them be organized, doing the organization for them. And it becomes a challenge when we turn over a skill to them with the expectation that they know how to do it, and they actually don't know how because they have not been expressly taught. And then these skills, like it says right here, these skills have to be taught. Students have got to learn, what does it mean to have a forward-thinking plan, particularly when my whole life has been planned for me. How do I understand this concept of time? How do I look at a set of papers and figure out where to put them and how to keep them? Now, I'm a woman of a certain age, and I went to school during the time when we had notebooks, we had binders, and we had dividers, and we were told, you had a social studies section, and you had a math section, and you had an English section, and you were told you had to have your 3 rings and your reinforcers because your paper would slip out. We don't educate in that same way anymore. But here's the challenge to that. And I'm not saying to go back, forward, or wherever, which direction you want to lean in. The challenge in not being taught that is the expectation hasn't changed. There's still the expectation that the students are going to be organized and they're going to know how to plan. So when a student doesn't do the kind of work that we think they should, we use language that is pejorative. We use language that is deficit-minded. We diagnose them as being disengaged. We diagnose them as having low motivation. We say that they don't care. Those are evidence pieces, but it's not evidence of what might be the issue. We also accuse them of having no motivation. Maybe the challenge is not any of that. Maybe the challenge is we need to take a step back and deeply, deeply understand what's happening inside the brain. If you follow me for any length of time, thank you again. But I want to say something about the way adolescents, what's happening with them. The adolescent brain is undergoing the biggest shift in its growth and development since that human being was a toddler. It is shifting. It is deciding what to hold on to and what not to hold on to. So when they are telling you that they don't remember something, they don't remember. When they're telling you they don't understand why they did something, they don't understand. When they're telling you why that they can't be organized or they're not organized, they're not there yet. And we are pushing structures on our students that is outside the bounds of their biological development. So what else does that look like? It's a slump, and that slump is real. Like I just said, the middle school, that development place, it is a major shift. The social emotional skills can dip through years. They go up, they go down, it's like being on a roller coaster. Behavior may signal development and not defiance. And adults must respond by building capacity. We respond with rules. We respond with the policy says. Now, there are places where there are restorative practices and we're looking at social emotional learning. That's a different conversation than what I'm talking about. We're talking about understanding the developmental place of a child. where are they in their development? And our response to them is often outside the realm of where their brains are. And that's really important to think about. We want to say that they might be immature. Is it actual immaturity or is it brain development? And this is a place where we have to be very careful with the ways in which we categorize our young people. That avoidance, that distress sometimes, that uncertainty, that is all part of the process and makes middle schools even messier than we realize. And what better time to begin really processing this is now. They're not in the building. So you have some space to consider what you can do differently. But here's something else I want to consider. The middle school slump is real, but the disconnection has become a system error. What we're seeing, the chronic absenteeism, remains elevated. Disengagement shows up in attendance. Now, attendance could mean I'm in your building. I'm there, but I'm not going to all my classes. Attendance could be I am skipping one teacher's classroom, but I'm staying in another teacher's classroom. The belonging, relevance, and support, all of that matters. And conditions shape whether students stay connected or whether they become disconnected. We begin to see this shift take hold in sixth grade. There's a real statistical dip in a student's sense of belonging between fifth grade and sixth grade. And they may come to school, but again, they may be in one teacher's classroom and not in others. And we are blaming our students because we are seeing evidence pieces, but we're not asking the question about conditions. And this is really a conversation around conditions. Now, I want to be clear. I am not saying that every piece of behavior must be coddled and must be explained away and that students are not to take responsibility. That's the opposite of what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we have to prepare students to take on the responsibilities we need them to take on. Because if they don't take on the responsibility, then we create the conditions for learned helplessness. We create the conditions for students not to be able to handle a very complex and dynamic world. I was in a session about a month ago, at the end of June, and there was a question on a table. And the presenter said, "What is the purpose of middle school?" We're in a room of about 50 people. By and large, every response was, the purpose of middle school is to get students ready for high school. If we were in a group live, I would say, raise your hand if you believe that the sole purpose of middle school is to be ready for high school. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, I don't believe that. The purpose of middle school is to be the onset of building a bridge between childhood and adulthood. The brain wakes up and says, you know what? It is time for me to begin my journey towards adulthood. That is why you see all of this uncertainty. That is why you feel the unpredictability. That is why it is really difficult for young people to make critical decisions. And you also see them moving between their friends and their adults. You see them trying on different language patterns. You see them moving between dressing styles. They're trying to figure out what it means to be them. And here's something. The underlying dynamics we miss. Adolescent development is colliding with a weak school design. That's a heavy statement. I'm going to talk about that more later. Root causes of absence aren't being diagnosed. And what I'll say to that is there are cases where the adult in the building cannot do anything about the absences of a child. That is a family dynamic. They can call every kind of agency that they want, and that parent is going to still make the decision that they're going to make, and the adults in the building cannot stop it, nor can they intervene. I have watched leaders do everything in their power to address absences with certain students. I'm not talking about those issues. I'm discussing the places where we can look at absences and notice that there's a root cause for it. Interventions are often fragmented and layered, but they're not coherent. They're not systemic. They don't follow a design or a course of coherence. And then we interpret or we misinterpret adolescent signals. What we're getting from our students is something that we don't understand. And because we have an adult brain and we may not understand the adolescent brain, we are really challenged to wade through this messiness and what it looks like to really support young people in becoming the adults and acquiring the skills that they need. They need skills on how to manage their learning. What does it mean to actually learn how to learn something? That's an opportunity during adolescence that we cannot miss. What does it mean to actually take responsibility and ownership of something? Another skill that we have to help our young people at this wonderful, messy age acquire and understand. And that has to be for the students who raise their hands all the time and the ones who don't. We cannot continue to look at the outward expression and miss the underlying pieces that are going to really get us to diagnosing. Because what we're doing here, like my title suggests, we are diagnosing. We're trying to solve the outward problems. We're trying to solve what we believe are behavior issues. We're trying to solve engagement issues. Students are not engaged. We're trying to solve the issue of students not being motivated. Let me tell you something. A young person is very motivated. But like my controversial statement said about a weak system, here's what I mean. The brain is doing something and it needs novelty. It needs newness. It craves the desire to put puzzles together and make sense of a world. It craves at this age independence and autonomy. But our systems, the system of schooling, is designed to be the antithesis of what the brain actually needs. So the brain development cycle and the schooling process are in conflict. And that is something we have to come to grips with. What does that mean that both of those are in conflict? It is creating the spaces where children are not being allowed to, what we say for adults, be their full selves, right? But they're not developing or not being given the tools and strategies to develop the academic persistence that they need, the academic learning skills that they need, the self-monitoring skills that they need, the organizational skills. And I'm going to say this, and you might ding me for it, leave me a comment, either like, you're crazy, woman. We're making the use of artificial intelligence the culprit. And we're making the use of technology and other tools like that the culprit. I'm not saying that those are necessarily great or bad, or good or bad. What I'm saying is we are misdiagnosing what's happening, and we're casting aspersions on the use of artificial intelligence and the use of technology as the easy target for why things in our learning environment are as bad as they are. When in fact, what it is a mismatch between the system and processes of schooling and the way the adolescent brain works. So what does it mean we have to do? Well, like I do every week, I'm going to give you some power moves. I've got 3 power moves for you. So here we go. Power move number 1, reframe the recurring problem. What does that look like? Identify the issue leaders keep naming. There's an issue that keeps getting named. Chronic absenteeism, student bad behavior, kids have low motivation, kids are disengaged. That's the issue that keeps getting named. Next thing you want to do is ask what adolescent skill may be missing. What is the missing skill that needs to be developed to disrupt and reframe those issues that we keep naming? Last thing, identify the conditions that keep producing the pattern. That is where we are really missing it. What conditions are in place that keep this problem going? And what's the impact of that? Leaders will stop misreading my mind. You know what? It's Thursday. My mouth gets stuck. I don't know if your mouth gets stuck. Mine gets stuck sometimes. Leaders will stop misreading developmental needs as student deficits, and they will begin to identify what students need, what should be taught, what should be coached, what can be expected to be practiced. That's what we need. What skill do they need? How can we coach them? How can we really expect them to practice the behaviors that they need? Power move number 2, study the adult pattern before the year restarts. You have a wonderful opportunity right now to really dig in and reflect on some patterns that may have been not as evident as the school year progressed. What does that mean? Track how adults responded to the issue they kept naming. What were the issues? Try to think through what you kept hearing as the reason for the issue. Notice where adults rescued, over-scaffolded, controlled, or even lowered expectations. Think through the response. Notice where those things were happening. Over-scaffolding is a huge issue. The question is, why do we keep doing it when we know too much of it is dangerous? Because we're paying for the outcome of over-scaffolding when kids are ill-prepared to work on their own. Then you want to ask whether the response builds capacity or dependence. That goes back to the over-scaffolding. Who gets over-scaffolded? Why do they get over-scaffolded? And when they're ready to take the reins themselves and they don't produce the exact result or the exact behavior, we want to then say they're not ready, they're not capable, they're not smart. When we have built a condition of dependence. Last one, power move number 3, build the missing condition. What does that look like? Choose one skill students need to practice. Think about that right now. If you are a middle school leader and you're watching, number 1, thank you for watching. But if you're a middle school leader, middle school teacher catching this in the replay, name one skill that you want students to learn and practice for the coming year. Design one routine that's going to teach it, and then give students the support, practice, and accountability. How will you do that? How will you give them the support? How will you give them practice time and accountability? That will move you from power protecting behavior into agency building. Something we talk about in my book, Understanding Your Instructional Power. What is the impact of this power move? Number 1, students return to conditions that build capacity. Instead of being punished, rescued, or over-scaffolded for skills they have not yet developed. We do not want to punish young people for the skills they have not been taught. And that's what's happening. That is why we're seeing some of this low engagement or classified low engagement. or this disengagement, or what we believe is low motivation, or what we want to name as a way of kids just are different these times of year. Now, I want to be clear. This is not about blaming anybody. This is a system. We are the system, but we have to take our own responsibility here and realize that how we are schooling our young people really does counteract how the brain moves and what the brain needs for development. And that is our conversation for tonight. I want to give you a couple of more reminders. One, go ahead and get this our article, Becoming Agency Savvy. That's really, really important. And tune in for our power chats. Our first one up was with Dr. Mary Rice Booth, and we are thrilled to have her. We got some great, great voices out there. It was one ed author, one book, and one big idea. And next week, I'm excited to bring to Let's Talk Power Live Dion Aminata, founder and CEO of Math Trust. She's an educator, a curriculum writer. She is the grade 2 through 5 lead for illustrative math. It's going to be a fantastic conversation. Make sure you're here. Again, if tonight's show resonated with you, go ahead, share it with somebody else. Have a great week. And I forgot to do this. We just started our Instructional Power Collective. It is a wonderful Facebook group where educators come together to continue the conversation about instructional power and power in education. So head on over to Facebook and join. It is a private group, and we will have you join our conversation about instructional power. I'm going to be continuing tonight's conversation, sharing some of our power moves in the private chat over on Facebook. So join us there. Again, go ahead and like and subscribe to the show. Love to have you. Want to keep dating, but would love a commitment. Everybody, have a great rest of your day and week.